take that out of the foreground here. We'll just selfie this.
Yeah.
A bit of a letdown after our production value of the last few, but...
They can't all be Hollywood.
It's a couple days after Christmas. We've both got lots of kids. You know, we're tired. Yeah. It's improvised, but we're going to see No Way Home. AKA, wait, this is actually going to outgross Endgame?
Yeah.
Who knows?
$1 billion.
I managed to go completely spoiler-free for like 2 weeks since release, and then got one 45 minutes before I left to come drive to your place.
I've managed to avoid spoilers. I kept seeing things like, you know, Spider-Man, blah, 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 and as soon as I saw the word Spider-Man, stopped reading immediately. Yeah. So I feel like I got close a few times. But I know nothing that isn't in the trailers.
I know one thing, which I'm so angry about, but hopefully it will be a minor thing. It's sort of the thing that was most easily guessed of any of them.
Okay, well, let me see if I can predict what it is.
It's just confirmation, you know.
It's the fact that there are going to be 2 other Spider-Men in this movie.
So, any predictions of our own for this?
All right, so predictions for other cameos that weren't in the trailers. I think we're going to get the Vulture. I feel like
that'd be interesting.
He skipped the last movie, and so we're due to see him again at some point. I think we're going to get at least one other cameo, if not multiple others, from, in terms of the multiverse stuff, from another non-MCU movie that isn't one of the 2 Spider-Man series that they already did.
I'm not expecting the Vulture. But I am going to predict that we're going to see Tom Hardy Venom.
You think Tom Hardy?
At least I think we're going to get some kind of Venom, but I feel like he's a lot more likely than Topher Grace.
Yeah.
He's the one that people like.
Right. Deaths.
I don't anticipate any major well, I mean, maybe it will be a tragic thing where he can't stop all the villains from dying at the end, and like I get the feeling that Doc Ock is going to be maybe kind of on their side and maybe will sacrifice himself again.
I think Doc Ock is probably the most likely to die and not just get sent back.
Green Goblin's going to die. I will be very interested to see. My speculation, it's less a prediction than a curiosity, is whether they are going to bother getting actors for Lizard and Sandman, or just have them as mute CGI monster characters.
Yeah, I'm hoping yes for Sandman, but I'm predicting no. I'm predicting they won't.
Yeah, I hope yes too, because to me he's been like maybe my favorite villain in the Spider-Man movies outside of Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
And like also for him and Doc Ock, there's a little explanation needed, like because their motivations were very specific to their movies.
Right.
And they don't really have any reason to be antagonistic to Spider-Man outside of that.
Right.
Unless they just know they're fighting for their own survival.
If these are the same versions we've seen before, after the point where those events in those movies had already happened, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Prediction? I don't know it's really much of a prediction, because the way he's dressed in the trailer, it seems like pretty spot on. Prediction, or at least hope, that we will be getting Sam Raimi J. Jonah Jameson rather than just podcaster MCU J. Jonah Jameson, that he will cross over too.
Oh, you think we're going to get 2 Jamesons?
I don't know.
A tale of 2 Jamesons.
I don't know that we will, but I would really love it if we did. It would be even better if we got all of the Aunt Mays.
That would be interesting.
I don't even actually remember if the first one is still alive.
Oh, that's sad. I don't either.
And
I don't remember who was in the Garfield movies either. So
I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying it would be really cool if it happened.
I think Happy Hogan's gonna die.
Oh, that would be interesting.
He's been around a long time. He's served his character arc. He's just kind of been a supporting role. I think that might be the emotional crux. I
think it'd be really hilarious if Morbius shows up, because I feel like 90% of the people will not even know who he is. And it will just be like the biggest face plant in history.
No, I do not think Morbius. And I have my doubts about Tom Hardy.
I am just really hoping for at least one, whoa, I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
Like cameo. Like Tom Hardy Venom for me would not be that. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield would not be that.
Like Chris Evans, fire guy.
Right, Johnny Storm.
Johnny Storm.
Just someone that we did not expect. It's Japanese Spider-Man from the TV series. It's, you know, Spider-Gwen.
Spider-Gwen, with
Emma Stone.
Emma Stone, yeah.
Yeah, something that it's like, okay, we're doing this wild speculation, but we do not reasonably expect and would completely blow our minds if it happened. I'm hoping for at least one of those.
At least one.
That they've held something back that will go, You're kidding! Whoa!
All right, well, we're running late. We should go
we'll find out. Sort of, except I can't lean as far back. Maybe I should just hold it to begin with. Loosen this one. Okay, oh no, it's like I'm holding a selfie stick. That's something I had vowed never to do in my life. All right, here we are. First thing, we should probably just mention and flash it up all over the screen so there's a little editing.
We don't have the budget for that kind of special effect.
Full spoiler. Like,
yes, full spoilers for both Spider-Man No Way Home and the finale of Hawkeye.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. And the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, if you haven't watched those. So hopefully you didn't get too many spoilers from the list of spoilers because we gave general spoilers first. And we're probably among the last people on Earth that don't already know this because the thing has already grossed like $1 billion.
We're the last ones to see this. I don't even know where to start.
Those sons of guns, they went and stealth adapted One More Day, the worst Spider-Man story ever, and I don't know if I can forgive that.
Talk about One More Day. I don't know about it.
One More Day is the deal where, you know, Peter Parker is unmasked during the events of Civil War. Aunt May has been shot. She's dying, and to save her life, Spider-Man sells his marriage to the devil so that Mary Jane forgets they were never married, their relationship never happened, and everything is reset, and in the process, no one remembers that he's Spider-Man, which later turns out to be because he separately went to Doctor Strange and had him cast a spell, although he, at the last minute, he pulled Mary Jane in, so she was exempted and she remembers. So we knew they were going to be adapting that part, which was not really part of One More Day, but like a retcon that came like a year later.
I see.
But the fact that they actually sort of
killed Aunt May.
Well, yeah, and he didn't even fix it this time, and did like completely undo their relationship by magic at the end.
Yeah,
is like,
although not a marriage, not as bad.
No, but that's why adapted, you know, loosely adapted.
All right, but
you know.
but clearly improved upon.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, that was really good, and I was really enjoying it, especially, you know, when all three of them swung down off the statue there.
Yeah, and they'll do their pose.
But it was kind of more melancholy in the ending that I would have liked. Like, I was super hyped for it, and in the last 10 minutes, I'm like, I'm not as hyped for it. Like, this is fitting for a Spider-Man movie, but one of the things that I liked about the MCU Spider-Man movies is that they weren't like that so much. And it's almost like they're like, Peter Parker's had it too good for too long. Let's give it to him all at once and have him lose everything.
This feels like the middle part of a trilogy, where you kind of kick the good guys down, you know, and they're like down, and they got to get back up in the next one. Because he won, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. A Pyrrhic victory.
He made things better for everybody except himself.
Right.
And Aunt May.
Right. Well,
I mean, she could be in a better place. She could be with the Uncle Ben that maybe didn't even exist in this universe.
Yeah, interesting.
You know, some trilogies, like the Dark Knight trilogy, it's like that is the superhero's entire career.
Right.
And then others, and I can't think of an example right now, by the end of the trilogy, they have reached the starting, almost like the Daniel Craig James Bond trilogy. At the end of...
Or like Smallville, the TV show.
Sort of, yeah. Where it's like, it ends where the character traditionally begins. And that's kind of what they did here. In some ways, it was a complete story of trilogy, because it ends with him sacrificing, giving up. You mentioned a big power creep. They reset that to basic Spider-Man levels.
Yeah.
And like now he is considered to be a menace, hounded by Jameson, out on his own, struggling to make a life.
The classic red and blue look.
Yep. He has power and responsibility and a dead relative metaphor, and you know, and a motivation, and he's sacrificing everything to be Spider-Man.
Yeah, the character has been fully formed.
Yeah. It's like, now Spider-Man can begin in his 6th or 7th movie.
Right. But that's, you know, they started in high school, so there's time for that.
So the big surprise character, the one that I didn't see coming, turned out to be, drumroll please, Matt Murdock, Daredevil. That was the only surprise cameo.
I remember people speculating, and when the first trailer dropped, there was somebody like you could see their arm or something in the shot, and people were like, oh, what if that's Matt Murdock when they were in the jail? And it wasn't. He was in a later scene.
It's like Doctor Who fans, whenever there's a female character in any trailer, it's like, maybe it's Susan, maybe it's Romana.
Exactly.
Maybe it's...
I'm excited to see Matt Murdock again in other stuff. I think it'd be great with Kingpin too.
Yeah.
After seeing,
and it's cool that it's been established that he exists in this universe.
Yeah,
like that's all that I'm assuming it's the same guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, having just finished Hawkeye, like, the Kingpin was an incredible villain.
Right.
So having him in one episode of one MCU show, like, I guess, okay, if you've already got 3 seasons of him in another show, but to me, it just felt like a waste. Like, there's so much potential with this character. He's so good. So,
for our predictions, technically, I said there'd be another cameo from a non-MCU movie, and Venom was in the post-credit scene.
Which I had heard tell that the post-credit scene in Venom 2 somehow involves him, like, suddenly he's somewhere else and he's seeing the broadcast of Jameson being like, "This is Spider-Man."
Oh, really? So that was that.
So that was, like, I figured that he was going to be in it. I just didn't figure, it was only going to be so disassociated from the movie. It's just a post-credits scene.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I think that was probably a later edition forced by Sony.
I think so.
Because it doesn't fit with the established rules of the movie, which is people who know Peter Parker, or maybe who know he's Spider-Man, are the people who are brought over. And Venom does not know Peter Parker,
right,
or that he's Spider-Man, or know a Spider-Man or a Peter Parker.
Yeah, so there's really no reason he should have come along. Yeah. And Eddie Brock from Spider-Man 3, the Topher Grace one, should have been there.
Yeah,
there's no reason
waiting on the other side of the glowy blue.
I guess, yeah, because he knew very clearly, like, I know he wasn't popular, but it would have been bold, and then it would have been a full Sinister Six, darn it.
Did J. Jonah Jameson from the first trilogy ever learn his identity?
No.
So, okay, so that was never on the table.
Right. I suspect, you're right, I suspect that was Sony marketing their own films.
Yeah.
And I bet Disney was not happy about that, and like you said, it doesn't even fit the rules.
Yeah.
But it would be very interesting if from a dumb little doesn't even make sense cameo scene, if that is how they actually introduce an MCU Venom. That would be even bolder than introducing what looks like maybe the main villain of Multiverse of Madness in a Disney Plus cartoon show, is introducing the MCU Venom in a joke post-credits scene. I will say, though, the biggest disappointment, honestly, and there was not a lot of disappointment in this film, I thought it was great, but the biggest disappointment was Jameson. Like, there weren't really any jokes with him. There was none of the charm. He was just there, and he was kind of a miserable, antagonistic presence that was just kicking Peter while he was down.
Because we only get to see the side of him that bashes Spider-Man, and we don't get to see the side of him that employs Peter Parker.
Right.
You know, you don't
Which could be in the next movie. They've now got the setup. He's got to be making a living somehow.
That's a good point. I bet that's what they will do. I bet he has to go out and get a job. He's just a normal guy with no identity. He's probably going to go work at the Daily Bugle.
Which it does make you wonder, because, like, his Lego Death Star was still there. He's got his stuff, presumably from his aunt's apartment, and the spell didn't erase his existence, just people's memory.
Yeah.
And maybe, presumably, like, electronic records of, like, streaming videos and everything where they could just look it up. We don't know exactly all of its ramifications, but in theory it doesn't erase his life, which means, like, does he still have a social security card he could go pick up?
That's a good point.
I always wonder that when people appear somewhere on a new planet or a new dimension or whatever, and it just shows them making a living, I'm just going, oh, but with no social security card, how would they ever get a job? How would they get any livelihood? Like, are they going to have to go find some illegal paid under the table?
Right.
Like, the logistics of that always bother me in science fiction. I know you're not supposed to think about it, but I always do.
You're not supposed to think about what MJ and Ned said to each other after the spell was cast, and they're just out on the middle of the Statue of Liberty Island.
It would have broke the emotion, but I always expected Doctor Strange, when it cut to a shot of him after the spell was cast, be like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. How did I get...
I mean, people clearly remember Spider-Man. The events that happened before the spell, they remember that happening. So shouldn't Doctor Strange be like, oh yes, I remember Spider-Man, we fought Thanos together on Titan.
Yeah.
I just never learned who he is.
Right. With magic, you gotta, like, okay, so you can just say magic does whatever you need it to do.
Right.
But what did it do?
Right.
So
you did establish that events that happened in full view of everybody with Spider-Man before the spell was cast remain, so shouldn't all of them remain? So, speaking of the Statue of Liberty, that was cool. I love the idea that they restored it to its bronze. They unrusted it.
Yeah.
Or copper. Yeah, that's what I meant. It's funny. I expected the shield to be in place of the book, not in place of the torch.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny because you made an observation about this in relation to Hawkeye.
You're talking about the scene where he's swinging around at the end. He swings past Rockefeller Center, and you can see the giant Christmas tree all set up and lit up, which means that this movie takes place before the end of Hawkeye, where they knock over the tree at Rockefeller
Either that, or they just put it back up really quickly.
Put up the backup tree.
But it's interesting because assuming that this is beforehand, and that would seem to make sense, but that would also mean that Kate is suggesting that Ileana go check out the surrounded by scaffolding Statue of Liberty while she's there.
I didn't even know, because that would be after. Hawkeye would be after, so she's suggesting that she go check out.
Oh, you're right, the ruined Statue of Liberty.
Ruins, the knocked over shield.
Hey, look, Spider-Man unveiled it for us. They canceled the shield.
Or it's far enough past, like, that they finished it, but it's still Christmas.
It's still Christmas time.
So is it the next Christmas?
He gave you his heart?
It's
the very next...
It's probably they just put the tree back up.
Probably.
I mean,
I guess. So either it's a separate year, or Kate was just making a really crummy suggestion.
I think that's probably what it was.
Go see that thing that isn't really much to look at right
yet,
now.
But interesting in the beginning when they get arrested, Peter gets arrested, that the police officer mentions, or somebody mentioned, Nick Fury has been off planet for over a year, so he told people about this, I guess. Like, right, or they know. I didn't even realize that information. The Department of Damage Control is that highly placed. I always thought they were just kind of like the low cleanup. Not only does he know that information, that Nick Fury's off-world, but that means that the Skrull taking Nick Fury's place was acting unofficially, and nobody knew that he was acting on part of Nick Fury. Why would Nick Fury even send someone to cover for him to pretend to be there if people knew that he wasn't? If people wouldn't believe that it was him. Like, that doesn't make any... The MCU's continuity being screwy? What is this? And Maria Hill was there too, who was also a Skrull, as it turns out. But like these two official agents acting officially, but no spoilers for everything. Everyone disavows that they even were doing that. Well, we can probably go inside. Yeah, we can do that. Change of venue. Yeah. Whoa! What? We were just somewhere else. Who are you? I'm. Wait. I'm Andrew Gilbert. We didn't coordinate what bit we were doing. So one of the things that really struck me is they could not resist throwing in a couple of the memes. Yeah, all right. We've got I'm something of a scientist. That one was hilarious. That was the delivery. My back. And I wonder when Andrew Garfield was saying "Me Too" if that was just, a bit that happens to Spider-Man, or if there were things that happened to him too. I don't know. Care about it. When they were in the lab working on their science experiments, and Ned was like, Peter Parker, he said Peter, and they all looked in there, then they all started pointing at each other. Like the meme of the two Spider-Men pointing at each other. I don't know if that was a direct reference, but... The one thing that struck me in that scene is like, I had a best friend, he died in my arms after he tried to kill me. And clearly they wanted to do the joke of Ned's like, oh, will that happen to me? But like, I feel like Peter would have said that after he saved my life. Like, that's a pretty awful way to remember what Harry did. Yeah. Doesn't Ned in the comics become a villain? Is he the one that becomes one of the hobgoblins? I think because he was brainwashed. So I think they were just that and the other joke about him not becoming. He's like, I won't become a supervillain. Right. I'll kill you. But like before this movie, Ned couldn't have become a villain. But now he doesn't know who Spider-Man and Peter Parker are. Right. So he could become the hobgoblin. He should just become actually like Alistair Smythe building Spider Slayers because he's a guy in a chair. Oh. It was kind of funny that that they just. It made sense for all the Spider-Men to unmask because they're offering emotional support, but they're just like, he breaks his Green Goblin helmet. That thing was kind of silly. But someone can just get it. He gets the classic comic look with the shawl and the tattered rags and everything. Right. I'm a big film score guy. I love, starting with the bridge scene, that they each had their actual themes from the movie. Like, hearing the Doc Ock, the dun, 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 dun. It was great. And there were only snippets of it. I think I barely caught Green Goblins. I definitely heard Sandman's theme. I'm not familiar enough with Electro's, but I think we got it in there. And then it was interesting with the Spider-Man. It was a lot more subtle. The only time I actually heard the classic Tobey Maguire theme was briefly while he was like doing the fluids in the lab just before Ned comes up to talk to him. But I definitely heard the Andrew Garfield one sometime during the section. I think it might have been when he caught MJ. And I do not mind saying like I was choking up at that point. I was starting to tear up. Yeah. It's like he redeemed himself. You could, and as Andrew Garfield, an amazing actor, because you could see right in his face what it meant to him to have
not failed this time.
Yeah, it was great that every character got their arc, and that's the pitfall that a lot of movies that have a lot of characters fall into is not really fun.
I would argue maybe the Lizard didn't.
Yeah, I was just...
But yeah, Sandman, I wasn't sure what they were going to do. I liked that he actually came in helping Spider-Man from the start. It felt like they were definitely cheating a little to have him antagonistic at the end, be smashing everything because, like, I want to go home. It's like, we're working on it.
He didn't want to wait anymore. I buy it because Electro specifically made it very clear that his goal is to destroy the box. And once the box is destroyed, he can't go home.
So he's desperate to get it.
Right.
Maybe I could buy that. But I would like to know what... Like, Goblin was clearly assembling his outfit, I guess.
Yeah.
And, like, okay, Otto is just plotting his next move, trying to figure out what to do. Flint Marco's laying low, waiting to get sent home.
Getting a couple
no problem. Electro was absorbing power. What was the Lizard doing? Like, he's the only one that doesn't really... He's just there.
Yeah.
Like, I was surprised that they got the actor, the voice, you know, and everything, but...
You think that was his voice the whole time?
I think so.
I think with Sandman, it may have been a sound-alike.
Really?
I don't know. Because they didn't use his likeness a whole lot, and at the very end, when you see him, I'm 100% sure that was just a CG face.
And it's funny, because he could completely assume human form all throughout the movie. I noticed that was... weird, maybe just other dimension doesn't work the same way, but clearly it was to give more impact when he actually turned human.
Right, and that worked, yeah.
Either way, it made them an actual character, and I wasn't sure they would do that. And I was impressed by that. Also, with the red herring, that for so long it looked like Norman was going to be the good one. And I liked what they did with him. But
I mean, to be fair, Norman was the good one. It's the Goblin.
Well, yes, but... Yeah, Otto Awakening, I was surprised he didn't start being like, you know, Rosie, what have I done? I expected him to come heroically in at the end and be on their side. When it actually happened, the moment was a little underwhelming. It was a little less than I was hoping for. Like, it was cool that he did, but it wasn't executed in such a way that I was...
Because he came in and saved the day for the second of, like, 4 or 5 villains they had to...
Yeah, right? But he also just did it very low-key. Like, they're mine, and then he just casually reaches behind him and pulls the thing off. Right. Like, it's not like a big moment. It
worked, I mean...
It worked, but it wasn't anything special, and I would have liked to have him coming in on the side of the Angels be a little bit of a bigger moment. But like I said, of all of them, I thought it was pretty well executed. The only one that felt like he was just there to me... I mean, Sandman a little bit was, but Lizard primarily.
He got to talk finally. He got to have some back and forth with the characters when he was in prison.
But he's literally caught off screen.
Yeah.
Stays outside the building while they're trying to fix things.
Right.
Goes and does who knows what he's even up to. What is he doing?
Yeah.
And then gets dispatched pretty perfunctorily. Doesn't have much to do in the final battle. Which, I mean, it's a huge ensemble.
Right, what do you do?
You give almost all of them justice, and there's one you can't. Lizard's probably the one you pick, because he's the shallowest.
Nobody remembers anything about Lizard from the movie anyway.
No. So it kind of works.
Yeah.
It is funny, though, because, like we talked about, Topher Grace Venom knew who Peter was. And both Harry Osborn goblins did, but we didn't get either of them. And I know that would have... just added in complicated friendship dynamics that they didn't really have time for. But it's just interesting who got left out. I mean, according to the movie, there were millions of people that got left out because of the infinite multiverse.
Right.
But people that came from the same universe as
in theory, there would have been infinite number of other Spider-Man who should have come through, as well as, you know, like...
But I could buy that these two dimensions are closest.
Yeah.
It's just weird that not everyone who fit that criteria from those two dimensions came.
Yeah.
And that, wouldn't it be funny if, like, random civilians that knew him too, you know, that those kids that were like, here, Mr. Spider-Man, we won't tell anybody. They're just
everybody from the train.
Everyone from the train. They're just wandering around, but they don't do anything important, so nobody knows.
Well... I think the movie, like, from a story perspective, it would have felt overstuffed if they had anybody else. This was the right number.
Goblin, Otto, Lizard, Electro, and Sandman. One person from each movie, which fits. But 5, really? You couldn't get a Sinister 6? I mean,
I think they want
to
probably avoid that because they're actually going to do the Sinister 6 with Scorpion and Vulture and nobody else. Because those are the only two. And Venom, probably. I really liked that scene in Happy's apartment when they were working on the cure, and Peter's sense goes off, his spidey sense goes off, and it does that really smooth, like where they zoom in and change the focal distance. I forget what it's called. And vertigo effect. Vertigo effect, and they do that for his spidey sense a lot, but this time it was like a really drawn out, you can tell it's something big's coming. And he goes out in the other room and he can't figure out where the threat is.
Right, which of them
like
it is.
He's looking around like, okay, it's coming from somewhere. And then he guesses right, and it's Goblin, but like, that was just...
would have been much more of a surprise if we hadn't had that scene where he's like, are you excited to be just you again? And he's like, from behind it all still. I mean, yeah, it's like, oh, well, you telegraphed that a
We gotta foreshadow it.
The prediction was that Happy would die.
Yeah.
And no, it is kind of funny that, like, I was thinking if he does, the stupid robot arm is going to be the cast member that outlives everybody else from the Iron Man.
Right, is Happy now the longest running...
He's the longest running, currently active one. He just snatched that title back from Abomination.
Yeah.
Who was in Shang-Chi for 30 seconds.
Right. He's gonna outlive every character.
Right. Happy Hogan will just be an old man. He'll be Old Man Logan in this universe, you know.
Do you think Wong in this movie was leaving to go to Hong Kong or wherever that fight was?
That would be really funny. And interesting now, I mean, it makes sense why he would be the one, like, checking out the rings and everything, because he's the Sorcerer Supreme on a technicality.
Right.
Because that's just like Spider-Man is only fully formed at the end of his trilogy. I'm sure Steven will only become Sorcerer Supreme at the end of, you know, his trilogy.
Yeah, possibly in the next movie if Wong dies.
Oh, they couldn't do that. He's like, everyone loves Wong. Yeah. I love the idea that he's pulling, like, a scam with Abomination.
Yeah.
Like, they're just working together. They did a pretty good job of Spider-Man versus Strange. I mean, it was mostly running.
You did.
But they made it believable.
Right.
Like, I don't know exactly why he was supposed to be able... I guess it was maybe his spider senses and reflex or something could keep him moving in frozen time.
Right, that was really neat that... because
Strange acted
like he'd never seen this before. Like, not even sorcerers could do this.
Right.
It was just a side effect of Spider-Man's
powers. And then he just goes back
into his body, and he can move his body while he's in astral form. It was basically Spider-Man running away from Strange. That was his goal. If it was a straight-up fight, one of them had to win and, like, imprison the other or knock the other out or something, I don't think he could win. I don't think over Strange.
I did like the whole idea that the mirror dimensions is all about, like, fractals and spirals. It is very... And that makes sense with Spider-Man as the math and science.
So he
could figure out how to...
Yeah.
That was a very clever way of doing it. Huge props to that.
Right. And then Strange was apparently just trapped in the mirror dimension the entire movie. Which is like, okay, so what would have happened if Ned had never learned to use the sling ring?
Right.
Would it just be trapped there forever?
So I guess, you know, you kind of wonder if you'll see him getting trained or something in a future movie.
And Strange seemed to take an interest.
Because technically Strange shouldn't have forgotten him just because he forgot these events.
So would he remember the events that led up to him casting the spell that he's not supposed to remember?
That's a good question. Just like would Ned remember having done any of these things
magic at all? Yeah. I don't think so.
As usual, magic leaves so many plot holes and questions. So you guessed correctly, by the way, that 45 minutes before I left to drive over, someone was like, I wonder if, you know, interviewing Chris Evans, like, would you consider returning for, you know, as Captain America at some point, the way that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield returned in Spider-Man No Way Home?
So you might spoil on that.
Are you serious? I'm just going to see the movie. I've avoided all spoilers for 2 weeks. And it was the most easily predictable. People are talking about this when the movie was announced.
Yeah, that, like, or are they going to bring him back? And
but it's just
even, like, set leaks.
Confirmation that it actually was happening.
Yeah, I mean, they were in a lot more of it than I was expecting.
Yeah, I thought it was just going to be a tiny little cameo.
Right. Like, at the end they show up, but... No, but that was great. It gave them so much time to have those like fun little conversations about the differences between their universes. And
you're amazing,
right?
and I felt like that was the filmmakers all saying, "Hey, like Andrew Garfield was not the inferior."
Yeah, everyone picks on Andrew Garfield,
and I like because you know I've always said I don't buy that in any way, as consumed with guilt as he was, that he was hallucinating Captain Stacy already when he was trying to be with Gwen, that after she died, I don't buy in any way that Spider-Man story ends any other way than suicide. From, like, completely consumed by the guilt and, like, mental breakdown. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I felt like the ending that what they did establish, that he's like, he became rageful, he stopped pulling his punches, he went to a dark place. I can buy that as a fitting continuation of how his story went. Because, yeah, that makes sense. They didn't just try and pretend, oh, and then I continued on being Spider-Man. There weren't any consequences because I got over it at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But, so I like that they went and established that, and then they gave him that redemptive moment, and you think maybe things can be better for him now in the future.
They didn't just fix the villains. They fixed the heroes, too.
Yes, they did. And they established that Peter and MJ are still together.
Yeah, that's interesting that, because all these characters came through at different points in their lives, and apparently Andrew Garfield came through shortly after the events of Spider-Man 2.
Not too shortly, though.
Not too
he talks about, I stopped pulling my punches.
Yeah, so there was some time.
For a while.
But he didn't say that he said he fought the Rhino, and he didn't mention having fought anyone else, but I guess probably for the audience's benefit.
Right.
So it could have been.
And I did love that he's just like, oh, all I did was fight a Russian guy. Like, that they made a joke out of that. Just like, they kept making fun of the vat of electric heels. As they should.
Gotta be careful where you fall.
Yeah. That was great how they're just like, oh yeah, I fell into a thing. I fell into a thing.
But Tobey Maguire looks so much older that they had to say, okay, it's been some years.
Yeah.
So it was nice that they had like a little conversation. He was like, yeah, it took some time to make it work, but he's still with MJ.
So what do you think, like, basically have the Spider-Man movies essentially been erased, and there are now new versions of them where all these characters live, and presumably that means even Harry would still be alive, because if Norman didn't start him down that path, you know, and he and Peter are still friends and everything's good.
I gotta say yes, because that's the entire motivation and victory of this movie, is that the villains are saved. Without that, there's no victory for the heroes.
Well, I guess I'm just saying, are they saved within the universe of the movies that we've seen? Or has a parallel universe in which they were saved now been created?
They've erased those movies from existence. You can't watch them anymore. All right, so what else did we talk about?
You know, I feel like we've covered a lot of it.
Yeah, covered quite
so
a
much
bit.
happened.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. The Sanctum Sanctorum covered in snow had nothing to do with anything.
No, but it was Christmas time.
It was Christmas time and stuff. And then I liked how it started melting at the end of the movie. It was just dripping everywhere, and there was just two random kids cleaning up the snow.
I know.
That we have no idea who they were.
When he came in, he's like, are these some kids that have done something bad? And Doctor Strange is like punishing them with perpetual shoveling the sidewalk or something?
I thought they were a magic illusion. I thought they were going to go to talk to them and they were going to like fade out of existence or something.
Yeah. Which also, by the way, in the trailer for Multiverse of Madness, we see the floor of the Sanctum is flooded. Like, it's flooded. And I'm just going to be like, I'm not trying to suggest that's melted snow.
Ecological disaster has happened.
They make it look almost like, oh, multiverse is unraveling. But it's like, what if it just ends up being a gag and it's just something that's happened like
he left the door open again and the water came in.
And it's nothing sinister or to do with anything else. In the
so in the trailer, Wong is like, don't cast that spell.
Yeah, and Strange is like,
wink, right. And everyone was like, why is Strange acting so recklessly? This is not his character. And then that's not how it happened at all in the movie. He didn't even warn him not to cast the spell.
It's not even a dangerous spell unless you try and change it.
And the interesting thing is, Wong's line, don't cast the spell, is not in the movie, it's in the trailer. They use it again in the trailer for Multiverse of Madness.
But yeah, that was very interesting. The setup was very different. Also, it is jumping ahead a moment, but I loved the what was it, the sub layer or whatever, and it's just like their basement with the washing machine,
the basement of the Sanctum, and then you see that it's actually just adjacent to the ruins, and there's just a big hole, and there's the ruins.
That was a great gag.
Yeah,
and that Ned was amazed by everything anyway.
And he found an ancient crossbow in there among all the laundry
and like Yahtzee. And I do wonder how many Easter eggs were.
That's another freeze frame scene.
Just like all the glowy figures at the end.
Yeah, where they're all coming through.
We made out Rhino, Scorpion, and then I couldn't tell anybody else.
There was someone standing next to Scorpion that had a spear.
There's some cheetah guy. I wonder if it's him. And I thought I saw very feminine figure next to the Rhino. It made me wonder if it was like Black Cat or possibly Silver Sable. But yeah, Black Cat was my thinking. But it just went by too quickly. There was also a glowing figure standing there when the spell was going wrong to begin with, you remember? When it was just him and Strange in the basement?
Yes, I do.
There was a really bright glowing figure.
Yeah.
And I wondered what was up with that. Is that supposed to be somebody? Is that going to be part of Multiverse of Madness without seeing that?
Or it was just establishing, because otherwise it might be hard to know what those figures were at the end because they weren't shown close up.
Right.
Just establishing that that's how you get through.
I was talking about, before we went in, that I kind of felt like I hope they don't torture us for too long with the life is miserable now for Spider-Man and drive him to the point of Doctor Strange, because, like, we get it, let's go, let's start the movie.
Right.
I felt like they did a pretty good job with it.
It was actually interesting to see the character, like, how he reacted to that instead of it just being like a slog. But
I still would have liked to see, like, because this always happens in movies like this, he could have defended himself a bit better, be like, that video was doctored.
Right.
You know, the drones were taken control of by Mysterio.
Yeah.
He was the one that killed everybody. Like, even when the teacher's like, murderer in the hallway, it's like, could you just try and say something? It would have been nice seeing him at least try and give, like, a press conference or something. Everyone already knows who he is anyway.
Well,
make a public statement,
like,
here's what actually happened.
if Tony Stark was still around, he would have set that up for him. But,
so what's Happy doing?
Yeah.
Laying down on the job. I guess he's under investigation.
Apparently he's being negligent with Tony Stark's technology.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I hope that the spell at the end fixes, because it feels like it almost ended up tarnishing all of, like, Happy and Stark Enterprise and everything, reputation in the process, and we don't have any indication that that got undone.
Yeah, you have to wonder what's going on with Stark Industries at this point. Is because in Hawkeye, you see he was using some Stark arrows, which he could have just gotten before, and had them this whole time. But, like, Stark's still around as a company, apparently.
Yeah.
So interesting that Oscorp confirmed does not exist.
Yeah, that was nice. They did a much better job of establishing where in the timeline each person came from, and what their motivations were, and how the universe is different than I expected them to.
No Avengers in either of the other Spider-Man universes.
Yeah, which is funny, because you even had that with the Venom scene, too, where he's like, so let me get this straight, you just have a whole bunch of power people. Because the Spider-Mans, they come from universes where they're the, like, only superhero
and
in
apparently
existence.
Venom comes from a universe where he's the only one as well.
Although,
superheroes.
He shares a universe with Morbius. In Morbius, he makes a joke about I'm Venom in the trailer.
I am Venom.
Oh, yeah.
So clearly they coexist. And it was either in the Morbius trailer or in Venom 2 that we not only, you know, saw Michael Keaton, who's clearly a different person in that universe, but there was that Spider-Man murderer graffiti. So that would suggest that Spider-Man does exist in the Venom universe.
So which movie has the Spider-Man graffiti?
I don't remember. It was in the trailer. I feel like it might have been Morbius.
If it was Morbius, maybe Morbius takes place after this, and Venom spreads the word of Spider-Man's misdeeds.
Yeah, maybe.
Venom did that graffiti, all of it. So are they going to introduce a fourth Spider-Man into the Venom universe if it's a different universe from all these other universes?
Yeah, well, and maybe Spider-Man has existed there, but like...
Or just
Venom
off to the
just
side. He doesn't pay attention to world events.
It's just like we were talking about with the events of Statue of Liberty and Hawkeye. It's like... There's a lot of, this was very ambitious and you almost pulled it off, but there are cracks. There are things that don't fit.
So we didn't get a proper post-credit scene for this movie that takes place in this movie.
Right. Well, I mean, we sort of did. I think that scene was, the Venom scene, was specifically filmed for...
Yeah.
Like, not...
Right, but it had nothing to do with it.
No.
At all.
No.
And I was kind of hoping we would get a Spider-Man will return.
You know, so one big thing that we did not talk much about yet is that, so we still have no idea what happened with Uncle Ben. It was nice to get a confirmation that Peter Parker was bitten by a spider. That's what happened. And that MJ does have Watson as the last name. We still don't know what happened with Uncle Ben and why he is Spider-Man because the speech he gives to Tony where he kind of, but doesn't quite say great power comes great responsibility, you know, if you have...
That's just the version he's figured out on his own, not the version Uncle Ben told him.
But the way he says it almost sounds like something bad did happen and he didn't stop it, like there was an Uncle Ben. But instead here, we get an Aunt May death, which I did not expect.
Yeah.
And she actually says the line, which that I should have known that it was gonna... I just should have known
when she said it, because she seemed fine, and it was like the perfect face.
She actually was fine.
Yeah.
She just had like a bit of a concussion, but when she said, with great power comes great responsibility as a mentor figure, internal injuries spontaneously exploded inside her body, and she started, dying.
There's certain rules to magic and the multiverse, and that's
exactly. But yeah, I didn't expect that. That was really sad. I thought maybe something would happen to change it, but no, they just decided, hey, in this universe, it's Aunt May instead of Uncle Ben.
And that's so much more...
Or Aunt May and Uncle Ben, we don't know.
Right, but it's so much more impactful because everybody knows about Uncle Ben, and you see it coming a mile away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything anymore. But it meant something this time.
Yeah, it was a real gut punch.
Yeah,
which again was why the melancholy ending of him sacrificing everything for everybody else was almost felt like, oh, I would have liked something a little more triumphant. Because it's like, no, we already had enough melancholy for one movie. This is as much tragedy as you get in usually like two Spider-Man movies crammed into one. I would have liked to have an end scene for Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and having a scene where like Tobey Maguire is swinging through the city, and he passes by a window where Norman Osborn is hard at work, and Otto, and they wave, would have been a little too corny, I'm sure.
No,
so you don't necessarily have to show
them. They go
them
back,
there.
And he arrives back in his universe on Christmas Day. Norman Osborn, Harry, they're around the table, Dr. Octopus. They're all sitting around the table, they dig into their turkey.
I'm not asking for that, although a scene where he like, wave, hey Max, or something, at one point wouldn't have hurt, just to establish, but I would have loved if they had something very much like that ending swing scene for all three. First you see Tobey Maguire with that theme, then you see Andrew Garfield with that theme, and show at least one villain. Again, you don't have to do all of them, that would be way too contrived, but just do one to show that this is a new status quo, that everything's been fixed. And then finish with Tom Holland. And the reason that felt like a glaring absence to me is what you said, this is the win. That he saved them all.
Yeah.
He sacrificed everything, gave up his entire life, all his family, all his friends, his entire identity to save them. It sure would have been nice to see them back in their universe safe and sound to drive home this is what he made that sacrifice.
Yeah, like seeing Ned and MJ happy and accepted into MIT, was it? Not quite enough.
Not quite enough.
To be that happy moment, like, you get
you wonder, is he, like, when he sees the bandage, is it supposed to be like, oh, I'm protecting her by not, bringing her back into this world? Because
I felt like that was more of him just, like, kind of poking a little bit, like, what could she start to remember? If she remembers the injury, maybe she can start to remember me, but she gives no sign of it, and so...
That might make more sense, and maybe it's just him committing to this is going to be a slow path. But to me, it almost felt like the whole... I have to protect her or she could get hurt, which would not be her. I mean, I guess after what happened to May, maybe, but she's never really been in serious jeopardy, so...
Right, I think it's more he's like, okay, I'm just going to look like a crazy person. I can't convince this person that they know me. It's not going to work. So
I have to build a relationship first.
Right. Here's my pitch. You start with Andrew Garfield because he's Spider-Man 3.
That was great.
Andrew Garfield, you have a scene with him interacting with Electro because... we can just shelve Lizard. He's not important. So he's like, because they seem to be almost starting to develop a relationship. He's like, you were never a nobody, and like trying to encourage him in that ending scene there. So you show them like working together or something, and then you show Tobey Maguire swinging through the streets, and you have J. Jonah Jameson with the hairpiece on, looking at him fly by his window out there, and so that he's back in, and then you do.
And then
Tom Holland.
Yeah, that would be much better. It did leave me a little more downer than I would have liked. But it still was a great movie. Like these are minor nitpicks and one thing that I feel like could have really aided the ending. But that's not to say this was a bad movie in any way.
No, not at all.
So let's see, any last little things moving through here? Playing it at fast forward. I mean, I did like the whole idea of that once he absorbed the Stark tech, it just took over, and it was now a new paired device.
Yeah, exactly.
Spider-Man
Stark Tech beats Dr. Octopus.
Like, I thought that Otto was just going to not try and attack him after he saw it wasn't Tobey Maguire, but instead it's like, nope, I'm just taking control now.
That was really great. That's how Peter beats him. It's just by controlling his arm.
And doing the iron spider suits that you had an 8-armed Spider-Man versus an 8-armed Doc Ock. That was really
looks
fun.
like we got some competition.
And I love that he was talking to them again, that they just pulled him right out of where he left off in the movie.
So that's an interesting
musical
thing.
theme and all. It was just like no time had passed.
So he got pulled out in the scene that he dies, is that right? Like,
it seems like just a little before he realized it's out of control.
Right.
Peter convinces him to, like 5 seconds before Peter convinces him. Although maybe it was a little sooner because then he would have had to die anyway. It was clearly, you know what I bet it was? I bet it was just before the whole Trinium part, where he knocks out Spider-Man on the train or whatever and brings in to Harry so that he gets the Trinium to go finish his machine.
Oh, okay.
I bet it was sometime during that section.
Yeah. Electro gets pulled out just before dying, apparently.
Like even after we've last seen him, he's already been vaporized.
Oh, yeah. So it's after the... And,
I like how he's like, I was in the grid, I was absorbing information, I was about to become pure energy. Oh man, I was about to die. Like at first he's buying his own press and he was about to become all powerful. It's like, oh, this is an interesting new twist to Spider-Man. It's like, and then he's like, oh shoot, that wasn't actually going to happen at all, was it? I was about to die.
Yeah, and then unclear when Norman got pulled out, but sometime shortly before dying. When did Sandman get pulled out? Like after he walked off into the sunset, basically?
Yeah, after the movie.
After the movie.
Which it would have been funny for someone to tell you, oh, by the way, you actually don't die. You're going to be fine.
Right, you're fine.
But then that wasn't his motivation. His motivation was just
which was interesting.
Nice touch.
He was like kind of a wrench in the machinery there. Just a different motivation from everybody else.
It would be nice if Tobey Maguire was also like, hey, by the way, when we get back, now that I don't have any sand powers to elude the police, I'm still a fugitive on the run and I want to go see my daughter. Could you help me out with...
Well, would he go back 10 years, 20 years in the future, or would he go back like this old version of Peter wouldn't know him? Or sorry, the younger version wouldn't...
It's true. He wouldn't remember that conversation anyway. Yeah. I'm just saying, he might be like, no, I was fine with my sand powers.
Yeah.
I was using it to get money for my daughter. I was good with this. Leave me be. Lizard was pulled out from somewhere in the middle of the movie. He doesn't really matter in this film. No one cares. No one cares.
That was the problem with Spider-Man 2. He didn't really matter.
Well, Amazing Spider-Man 2 was the worst movie, but funnily enough, like Lizard was from the first one. It's just that he ended up more forgettable because Electro in all of Spider-Man 2 was memorably bad.
Right.
Whereas the first Amazing Spider-Man was just really bland in terms of the villain.
He's still kind of evil. He wanted to turn people into lizards before he himself turned into a lizard.
Right.
So did they fix that part of his brain?
He was trying to regrow his arm. He really only hatched the turn everyone else into lizards like me after he was a lizard. So he was like, this could be used for good. Then they cut his funding, so he did the desperate inject myself thing.
Lizard was better than human from experience.
Well, you got the impression that just like Electro and just like Green Goblin, it's like the powers messed with his head. While he was in that altered state, he was thinking differently.
Sure.
Because at the end, when he was human again and in prison, he was sort of like, oh, hey, Peter Parker's a good guy. You should leave him alone, Mystery Shadow Man, setting up the Sinister Six. Yeah. That will never happen. Oh, the scene, I liked him swinging on the electrical towers. Like, that was a good look.
Yeah.
Like,
and as soon as I saw the electrical towers, I was like, all right, this is going to be Electro. And then the Sandman kind of was popping up in the background. I was like, oh, maybe not. Maybe there'll be Sandman.
But it was interesting, the idea that if he got depowered, he just returned to human form. But we can say maybe that's partly because of the power from this universe that was different that he absorbed, stabilized him. Because I certainly did not get the sense that that was going to happen in Spider-Man 2.
It just kind of happened in this movie, and they just didn't really explain it. But
I think we
pretty much covered the whole thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I liked it. I was really impressed how it handled all the characters. With Tobey Maguire and with Andrew Garfield, they played around with it nicely. It was very satisfying. And while I would have preferred a happier, more triumphant movie, like the way that they fully formed Tom Holland's Spider-Man from what has been a very non-traditional portrayal, really works.
Yeah. All right.
Yep. Ending of some sort.